Today we're talking about the Boeing 737 MAX crashes and exactly what caused them. So did Boeing knowingly break a strict code of engineering ethics? In that, did they put out a product that knowingly could fail easily and injure people? Merriam-Webster's definition of ethics is the discipline dealing with what is good and bad and with moral duty and obligation. My initial thoughts is hopefully not. As an engineer, I hope, as an aspiring engineer, I hope that people will never implement systems knowingly that can harm people. First crash was at Lion Air Flight 610 on October 29, 2018, and the second crash was also a 737 Boeing MAX 8 that happened via Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302 on March 10th, 2018. So let's look at the airplane itself and what's so special about the 737 Boeing MAX 8.
The two biggest airplane manufacturers in the world are Airbus and Boeing, and they have a fierce rivalry. If one of them can offer a better plane, the other could lose a lot of money. That's exactly what was about to happen in 2010. Airbus announced that they would update their most popular model, the A320, a single-aisle airplane that services many domestic flights. You've probably been on one. For this new plane, Airbus had a big update. It would have a new kind of engine. It was much larger than the previous engine, but it would make the plane 15% more fuel efficient. And just as importantly, this upgrade wouldn't change the plane that much. A pilot could walk into the new model with little additional training and be on their way. It was called the A320neo, and it would save airlines a lot of money. This was a problem for Boeing. To compete with Airbus, Boeing's obvious move was to upgrade the engine on their single-aisle plane, the 737. But there is one issue. Here's a sketch of the 737 next to the Airbus A320. Notice how the 737 is lower to the ground than the A320. This meant Airbus could slide a new engine under the wing of their A320, but there wasn't enough room under the wing of the Boeing 737. But a few months later, Boeing's product development head had big news. He said, "We figured out a way to get a big enough engine under the wing." Their solution was to move up the engine on the wing so that it would be slightly higher, and it would fit on their 737s. Here's a promotional video of that updated 737 in the air. You can actually see that the top of the engine is above the wing. Boeing called this model the 737 MAX. And just like Airbus with the A320, Boeing said that their new plane was so similar to its predecessor that pilots would only need minimal additional training. The 737 MAX became the hottest selling plane on the market, and it helped Boeing keep up with Airbus. Except moving the engine up on the 737 had a side effect. When the 737 MAX was in full thrust, like during takeoff, the nose tended to point too far upward, which could lead to a stall. This was a problem because these planes were supposed to behave exactly like the old ones. So Boeing came up with a workaround. Instead of re-engineering the planes, they installed software that automatically pushed the nose downward if the pilot flew the plane at too high of an angle. They called it the Maneuvering Characteristics Augmentation System, or MCAS.
Now this system only acted on one sensor. And if my sources are correct, there were two sensors available to use. It also says that the pilots operating these 737 MAX 8s did not require any additional training. They could just get into the 737 MAX 8, be able to fly it, good to go.
We learned that there was a system on the aircraft which we had no knowledge of. It wasn't in our books, we hadn't been trained to it, It was absolute blindfold in a dark forest for us.
So how did these crashes happen? Well, upon further investigation, it seems that their MCAS system had failed, being that the sensor feeding the MCAS system failed, and the data it was receiving was wrong. So it was going to lower the nose and causing it to dive down to the ground when it should not have, because it was receiving improper data. And in my personal opinion, it just seems ludicrously unacceptable to only have this software running off of one sensor. What happens when that one sensor fails? They crash. 2 planes crashed because one sensor failed, when there's multiple sensors able to be used, and they didn't use them. Even after the first crash happened, they didn't reevaluate this system and change it, and a second crash happened. And then after that, there was still months before they decided, hey, wait, we need to fix this. It's in my opinion that Boeing acted unethically. They put profits over the safety of individuals, and this should not be happening in today's engineering society.
And this voice said, "Is this Susan Riffle?" And I said, "Yes." And they said, "Are you alone?" And so I just knew. And I just said, "Both our boys?" And he said, "I'm really sorry."
346 lives and the reputation of Boeing, the world's largest aircraft company, lay scattered in the waters of Indonesia and in the soil of Ethiopia.